living to support. And you are crystallizing and clarifying the importance of these core values. And I just can't encourage you enough. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep talking to your neighbors. Talk to your neighbors who don't agree with you. And remind them that this is a positive thing. This is a great thing. And this is the reason that makes us as a community, a true community, and as a society, a true, proper, reasoned society, the envy of the world. And make this movement, make your place where you live, your neighborhoods, your new state, the envy of the nation and the world. You can do it, but emphasize the positive, and remember, it's the good fight that we fight. It's not an angry fight. It's not a negative fight. It's the fight for the values that make us strong and make us together unbeatable. Thanks so much. Keep it going, and you, Sally. God bless.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Representative Shea from Legislative District 4. It's coming up.
How's everybody doing? Good. Liberty! I love it, liberty! Man, so, hey, if the British aren't going to Brexit, we're going to LEXIT, right? Right? Gracious, they can't get their act together over there. They've delayed it now to like April 12th or something, whatever. It's supposed to be today. Come on, that's why we broke off from England, I think, right? Because they couldn't get their act together. All right, so hey, I want to introduce a few representatives that are here. They're not going to be speaking, but that support what we're doing. First of all, from the 9th Legislative District, two of the most fierce property rights defenders in all of Washington State, Joe Schmick and Mary Dye. Raise your hands. There you go. Also from the 16th Legislative District, Prosser, Washington. He's actually one of the guys that sits next to me on the floor and actually makes sure I vote right. Okay? Bill Jenkins. Go ahead, raise your hand, Bill. And when I'm done, we're going to bring up somebody very special who I can see in the back clapping lonely right now. All right. So, I want to just talk a little bit about our foundations. And my entire speech is pretty simple. I am tired of downtown Seattle politics, aren't you? Yeah. And I want to just talk, I don't normally read speeches, but there's a couple parts of this I just want you to hear. You know, we are a Judeo-Christian country. That's where our foundations come from. They are. And I don't think we should be ashamed of that, because it was those foundations that allowed for freedom to happen. And there was a group of people in the 20th century who, based on the writings of an anti-Christian, anti-Semitic guy named Karl Marx, thought we could do it differently with communism. And it ended up being the bloodiest, tyrannical century in the history of the world because of that. But then there were some folks in Venezuela who said, hey, you did your communism wrong. We want to try something different. Right? And now we're seeing in Venezuela the fact that they're living years on now, by the way, with food shortages, no freedom, guns being confiscated, and now a massive power outage that's blacked out the entire country. And they're still saying, hey, let's try socialism now here in Washington. Right? We can do socialism better, right? That's not our values, beliefs, culture, tradition, and heritage. It's just not. I believe in individual liberty, and there's something great about individual liberty. It's scary because you could fail. But you know what? That's what motivates us to succeed. I want to read something from the atheist communist Chinese, because I love quoting them. All right, so we studied everything we could from the historical, political, economic, and cultural perspective. Now, this is the Beijing Academy of Sciences. At first we thought it was because you had more powerful guns than we had. Now I want to stop there. They're trying to figure out in this study what makes the West great, okay? At first we thought it was because you had more powerful guns than we had. Then we thought You had the best political system, but that wasn't it either. Next, we focused on your economic system, but in the past 20 years, we realized that the heart of your culture is your religion, Christianity. That is why the West has been so powerful. The Christian moral foundation of social and cultural life was what made possible the emergence of capitalism and then the successful transition to democratic politics. We don't have any doubt about this. Even China knows why. Woo! Yeah, let's give China a round of applause for getting it right for once. Look, I don't bear downtown Seattle any ill will. I really don't. Let them experiment with socialism, but darn it, let us experiment with liberty. Let us experiment with liberty. And like I said, a state should represent the basic culture, traditions, values, and heritage of a people. And right now, I don't feel represented by downtown Seattle, right? And their values. And let me just read off a few, okay? See if you agree with these, all right? They always say in Olympia that we need to be one Washington, okay? Well, here's what one Washington means. It means confiscating your mining claims or making it so you can't even mine from your mining claims. Do you share those values, traditions, culture, and heritage? No. How about showing pornography to our children under the guise of education? Do you share that value? I don't. How about attempting to ban the right to bear arms or make it so darn hard you can't even own a firearm? Do you share those values? How about attempting to ban the right of free speech on our college campuses? Do you share those values? How about taking away parental choice? And by the way, if you haven't seen the article out of Arizona, this is where it's headed. Did you see what happened to those parents down in Arizona? A SWAT team busted down their door, seized their children because one of their kids had a high fever, a fever which broke, and they didn't take them to the hospital. Think about that for a second. Do you want to see that here in Washington? No! How about trying to mandate vaccines against our will? No! How about tearing apart limb from limb babies in the womb? No! How about allowing the destruction of our private property by introducing wolves or whatever other regulations are going to take away our private property? Does that sound like your values? No! How about restricting our ability to prosper by taxing the good out of us with B&O taxes and higher property taxes or low carbon fuel standards that are going to raise a gallon of gasoline price by 20 cents? Does that sound like your values? No! How about free heroin needles? Does that sound like your values? No! How about allowing homeless camps to wreak havoc in most downtown areas on the west side of the state? Does that sound like your values? No! How about calling us ingrates and hicks and ignorant sodbusters from the east side that should be grateful for the beneficence of downtown Seattle? Good reason to let us go. That doesn't sound like it either. Or how about just simply this, what Jim Walsh was saying? Just telling us that they think they know better than we do how we can live our lives. I don't want to live in a place like that, do you? No. So when we talk about freedom and when we talk about liberty, I think we just need to be completely unashamed that if we go forward from this date, that people that say, it's never going to happen, Matt, you're never going to split the state, that we just say, wait a minute, it's already happening. We don't have a choice. And oh, by the way, for those of you that have ever worked in construction, it's easier to build a new house than it is to remodel one. And for those critics that are out there, I just want to say this. Theodore Roosevelt said it better than I did. It is not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms and the great devotions and spends himself in a worthy cause, and who at his worst knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at his best, even if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls that know neither victory nor defeat. I am sick and tired of people saying, I don't want to risk success. That idea is hateful to Americans. My ancestors that came over to this country, if they thought that way, would have drowned in the ocean coming from Ireland. Yep. I want to live free so my grandkids live free. Amen. Don't you? Amen. Don't you? And I'll just end with this, because I'll get wound up, because we got to go vote on the budget here. And by the way, I mean, just $9 billion more, and they still have to raise taxes. I mean, does that share? No, that's not our values.
No.
You hold on to your pocketbook, too, while you're walking around here today, all right? Look, this is simply, for me, I think it's summed up in one line, and I was actually thinking about this last night, that I would rather die and fail in the pursuit of freedom and liberty than live in the bondage of tyranny.
Amen.
Amen.
And I know all of you share that. And I really I have a love-hate relationship with technology, because people are like, oh, I don't need to show up, you guys are going to live stream it. You got to show up. Whoever's listening online, you got to show up, okay? Make a difference. Look, I want to thank everybody out here that has been volunteering and all the teams that are forming across Eastern Washington. 23,000 people have been surveyed over the last 3 years, 72% support. We are the majority. This is going to happen. We're going to see Liberty State in our lifetime, and it's going to be us that's going to do it. God bless you guys, and thank you for being here today. All right.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Pastor Matt Bauer from Zillow, Washington.
Well, I'm a pastor, so you're going to hear Jesus.
Amen.
Good. One of the primary tasks of a minister of the gospel is to give moral clarity to the issues of the day through the lens of Scripture. Pastors need to rise up again from the pulpit, clearly defining what the Scripture has to say about moral, legal, cultural, and religious issues. Let me begin by quoting a patriot pastor, Charles Turner of Duxbury, when he explained the point of view of pastors in 1773. He said, quote, "The Scriptures cannot rightly be expounded without explaining them in a manner friendly to the cause of freedom," end quote. Here are just a few Scriptures friendly to the cause of freedom. Galatians 5:1 says, "Stand fast therefore in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again with a yoke of bondage." John 8:32, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." Proverbs 14:34, "Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people." As 19th century historian J. Wingate Thornton said, quote, "To the pulpit, the Puritan pulpit, we owe the moral force which won our independence," end quote. In this vein, it is wholly right and proper to address the Christian foundations of the principles of government. Proverbs 22:28 says, "Do not remove the ancient landmarks which your fathers have set," end quote. It's my opinion that Washington State has made a very significant shift in the last number of decades, a shift away from our God-given freedom of religion, biblical morality, and the principles of government. As a minister, I agree with Moses Parson when he says, quote, "Watchmen upon the walls must not hold their peace. They must cry and not spare, must reprove what is amiss and warn when danger is approaching," end quote. Our elected state officials need to be reminded of their duties and responsibilities again. In 1754, Pastor Jonathan Mayhew declared, quote, "Rulers derive their power from God and are ordained to be his ministers for good," end quote. The founders of this state and the nation, though not all Christian, understood the principle. They were able to choose a form of government based on biblical principles that civil government should be minimal. Thomas Barnard in 1763 said, quote, "All power has its foundation in compact or mutual consent, that is constitution, or else it proceeds from fraud or violence," end quote. Our state constitution and our national founding documents recognize the sovereignty of God. But even those who are not Christians still understand that there is a binding of the law upon the governments and the people. In the words of Rutherford, "Lex Rex," or "the law is king. It is not the king is law." But wait, there's more. We have moved the ancient landmarks that our fathers have set. We have moved the ancient landmark of sovereignty and the preamble to the Washington State Constitution. Anybody read the Washington State Constitution? Its preamble says it places the sovereignty of God fully in the hands of God. It says, we, the people of Washington State, grateful to the supreme ruler of the universe for our liberties, do ordain this Constitution. That's God. Grateful to the supreme ruler of the universe for our liberties. In addition, the Declaration of Independence recognizes that we are endowed by our Creator by certain unalienable rights. Our rights come from God, not man, not the state, not the legislature, not the Supreme Court, not the governor. What God has granted us, man cannot legislate, zone, or regulate away. They are unalienable. They are not to be infringed or impaired by civil authorities. Not even by a people's initiative can we take away our own rights. We cannot vote our rights away. It would violate the law of the land, which is the Constitution. God is sovereign and Christ is king. Civil authority is to be minimal and bound by the chains of its own Constitution. No one has the divine right of kings or the divine right of democracy to violate the laws of the Constitution, that is our covenant, without violating our constitutional security. The second ancient landmark that we have moved recently is our freedom of religion. Article 1, Section 11 of the Washington State Constitution's Declaration of Rights state, in part, quote, absolute freedom of conscience in all matters of religious sentiment, belief, and worship shall be guaranteed to every individual, end quote. This is our freedom of religion, not tolerance. Liberty of conscience cannot be confused with tolerance. The state does not tolerate religion, it guarantees it. For all law is legislated morality. It's rooted in the religion of the people. Laws promote what is good and punish what is evil. Therefore, when a law is passed that endorses perversion in the name of tolerance, then my liberty of conscience, my freedom of religion has been violated. Tolerance of evil will ultimately result in intolerance of righteousness. The question isn't whether law is moral or not. The question is whose morality is being legislated. Isaiah 5:20 says, quote, woe to those who call good evil and evil good, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. In order to call good evil and evil good, there would be no end to the laws passed in order to establish a new moral order. G.K. Chesterton stated it plainly when he wrote, if men will not be governed by the 10 commandments, they shall be governed by the 10,000 commandments. And we have the tens of thousands commandments governing us for a new moral order. Well, some of you may say, as a pastor, aren't you supposed to pray for your leaders? Well, yes, I do. I pray exactly what Paul prayed when Paul wrote to Timothy. He said that we are to pray, quote, for kings and all those who are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence. The prayer was not so much for the kings of those in authority. The prayer was for us, the people. We are to pray that the leaders would be able to lead us in a quiet and peaceable life. That is, that they would leave us alone. So how are we to pray? My prayer is that those in authority may be saved or restrained, that I may be able to raise my family and preach the gospel in a way, the God-honoring way, that limits interference from civil government. And in conclusion, the proposed state of liberty is not abandoning Washington State. Washington State has abandoned liberty.
Yes.
We need to reclaim our moral, cultural, and religious liberties. There's not only a place that could be found, no other place could be found than the Lordship of Jesus Christ and the freedom found in obeying His commands. For where the Lord is, the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. I agree with the founding generation's rally cries, no king but Jesus, and resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesus' name. Sorry, guys, we got to go vote on a transportation budget right now. I want to recognize a couple of legislators that were out here as well that had to go back inside. Kelly Chambers from the 25th District and Puyallup on this side of the state. Tom Dent from the 13th District over in Moses Lake. And now I want to bring up three legislators to say a couple of words if they're willing to do it. One of my great friends, the head of the Washington State Guard, Brad Clippard, come on down from Kennewick, Washington. My seatmate, Bob McCaslin from Spokane Valley, Washington. And Robert Sutherland from the 39th District, again, on this side of the state. You see a theme here. All right, guys.
This is actually a blessing. Nobody wants to follow Representative Brad Clippard. I love this man. I love this man. I just want to say quickly, my dad, the late Senator Bob McCaslin, he and Senator Morton from the 7th District got together and said, you know, we're getting really tired of this whole Seattle is dictating what the rest of the state needs to do. Let's write a bill, and at first we'll make sure that it's a messaging bill that we split the state in half. There was no naming of the state. There was nothing but that. But boy, my dad got a lot of flack over that. And those same things are still happening. They go, well, think of all the things we do for you. And you contribute nothing. And so as I'll quote Matt Shea in this, is that, well, let us go then. Amen?
I'm not following Clippard. Thank you, sir. Robert J. Sutherland from the 39th Legislative District. This is my first my first session here, so thank you, guys. You know, there's 98 representatives. Seattle has like 40, 42, something like that. They are running the state, the entire state. If you looked at maps of conservatives versus liberals and their policies, our map is red, except the blue run our lives. They're coming after our property. They're coming after our guns. They're coming after our children in our schools, and it's unacceptable. And it is now time for us to tell Seattle that we've had enough. We want to rule our own lives. We want to run our own children, and we want you to leave us alone. We're going. I'm getting texts right now, get your butt on the floor or we're going to hang you. So we got a transportation budget that we've got to talk about. I'm going to keep my words very brief. Thank you guys for showing up. Mr. Clippard.
I was hiding in the back today because my heart is heavy, ladies and gentlemen. There is legislation that's coming out of this legislature that you do not want in Washington State. You do not want to live underneath that. There's a bill last year that was so egregious, so horrific. They asked me, Brad, if we run this bill, will you just be a silent no on the floor? And I said, there is no way if you run this bill, I'm going to sit there and be quiet. So they didn't run that bill last year. Guess what? That bill that was so horrific, they ran it this year and they passed it off the floor. And it just passed out of the Senate committee yesterday, 4-2, down party lines. So, and ladies and gentlemen, it's not going to get better next year. And so my heart is really heavy about the legislation that's being passed out of this legislature this year. And so I ask you to pray, and I ask you to fight, because If we don't get this turned around, everything that you've heard today is true, and you'll have to live under it. Do you know, I keep hearing the word Seattle, do you know that less than 10% of the state's population lives inside the city of Seattle? Less than 10% of the state's population lives within the city of Seattle. Why are we letting them run our lives? Why are the other 90% of Washingtonians not getting their ballot and saying we're not putting up with this anymore?
Right.
That's what we need to do. Number one, I ran a bill my freshman year, my sophomore year, that said to divide Washington and Oregon down the middle, right down the Cascade Mountains, to make two different states, Eastern Washington and Eastern Oregon, and Western Washington, Western Oregon. Do you know who complained the most? The conservatives on the west side, who said, don't leave us over here alone with them. That's who complained the most. That was most fearful. So I'm just asking you. We need to multiply the numbers here by about 10, 20, 30, 100, 1,000 on this steps. We don't have enough people in this fight. We need to get more people in this fight. And we need to hustle, because I just heard on the radio too, what, Puerto Rico is now, somebody in Congress made a motion that Puerto Rico would be the 51st state. Correct?
We're talking with Puerto Rico right now. Yep.
Okay, so we need to get on this. We need to get this done. And why are we doing this? Just for notoriety, to be 51 or something like that? No, we're doing this to protect, as Matt said, the principles and the values that we hold dear to our hearts. They're not being represented at this time. And so get in the fight. Never give up. Never, never give up. Okay? How many are with me in this fight? I love each and every one of you. And that bill that I was talking about, that's a bill that concerns your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. And you don't want the horrific things that this bill will allow to happen in this state. And so in the interest of time, I'm going to let you go and say thank you very, very much for you being here. Get in the fight. Fight for liberty. Fight for freedom. Fight for truth. And fight for justice. God bless you all.
Thank you, sir. Again, you're hearing it. They need your support. You guys need to be activists. You know, years upon years speaking up here. I keep trying to motivate, like I usually say, reach, teach, inspire, motivate, and educate. Got to go out there within the communities, get them politically active, getting people out here to see and keep these guys in check. On the 27th of April, I'm an event organizer, founder of March for Our Rights. Last year we drew over 2,700 people. We're expected to do even more this year, double the booth. So again, we welcome the East Side to stand up. The 51st state will have a booth at that march, so represent, and get your voice out. And guess what? It's going to be right at the end of the session, and it's also when a lot of the folks here in Legislative District 22 is going to be out here. So it gives you an opportunity to engage, and it gives you an opportunity to show your voice that there is another Washington out there, not just Seattle and the West Side. So again, I want to invite, again, thank you for speaking, for Scott Brown from the Washington Miners Association and Resource Coalition. Thank you.
I have a question. How many of you wear jewelry? By a show of hands. How many of you have a cell phone? How many of you have a laptop computer or a desktop computer? How many of you drive a new car that's computer controlled? Where do all of the elements come from that run those electronic devices?
From the ground.
Exactly. Without the small scale miners, we are dependent on other countries that are illegally doing it with child labor. They're not paying their employees. Our Constitution and our Congress in 1872 granted us the right to seek out and recover valuable minerals on federal lands. This legislation right now is violating that law. We are in the process right now of fighting two bills which are banning us from using a motorized or aquatic siphon
dredge for picking up minerals out of our federally registered and maintained claims. It has passed, well, 1261 did not pass out of the House, but SB 5362 passed out of the Senate and has gone through committee already. And what they are doing is they are banning us from dredging for precious minerals. But yet they'll allow the environmentalists out there to use the same piece of equipment that we use to remove aquatic plants from the systems. And they're leaving that alone. They're allowing them to continue to dredge the Columbia River without requiring permits like we want us to do. They're expecting us to go through the Department of Ecology here in the state of Washington to obtain that permit. They don't have such a permit. To go under their general permit is $4,000 per year. Okay, that ain't gonna happen. It's not. They're also in violation of a mineral trespass law that was passed by this same legislation in 2003, which clearly stated that if any person or persons attempt to stop a legal mining operation are in violation of that law. Carries a 5-year prison term, $5,000 fines, and a Class C felony for the rest of their lives. Why are they doing that to us? They make the law, but they won't abide by that law. 90% of our claims are located on the east side of the mountains. That's why we're in support of the Liberty State. We have over 1,400 members that are willing to move over there because of our claims. Documentation was put out that our claims only take up 7 miles of the total waters of the state of Washington. Does anybody have any idea how many total miles of water we have? Over 65,000 miles of rivers and streams. And our federal mining claims take up just 7 miles. And they want to keep us out of the water. That's why we're supporting the Liberty State. They make the laws, but yet they can't abide by that same law that they wrote and they signed and they passed unanimously in the legislation in 2003. And we will, as the mining group, we will stand with Liberty until it is done.
Again, thank you for coming out. This concludes the Liberty State event, LEXIT. Again, we got a big job ahead of us. You need to go back and activate as many people as you can. Start stimulating this discussion. And again, thank you for coming out. I'd like to thank all the speakers for coming out and lending a voice. And this is your opportunity to go out to the galleries and actually check out how Olympia works and engage your legislators. At least say hello to your representatives, East Side representatives here. If you can't catch them in the office, at least leave a note to their allies and say thank you for all the good things that they're doing. So again, thank you very much, and we'll see you guys here 27 April. Bigger voice. Great job. Thank you.